I want to make sure that you understand to start with that I'm not a war hero. I think war heroes were either wounded or killed or taken prisoner or something like that. None of that happened to me. I came home safely and everything was all right. I took the plane over, dropped the bombs, and brought the plane and the crew back. That was my job, and I did it. I also want to point out that I was not a professional soldier and had no desire to be. I was a citizen soldier like my ancestors in many wars before, going all the way back to the Revolution. So I was sent to Ardmore, Oklahoma to join this B-17 crew that had already been formed as a co-pilot. Well, that bothered me for a while, but I've come to realize it was a good thing for several reasons. One of which was that I actually got into the European theater when there was some real honest-to-God fighting going on. It was not as it was later, where the Air Force just really hauled bombs over and dropped them like artillery. We actually fought our way to the targets and back. So we were assigned to the 306 Bomb Group, 368th Squadron, at Thurlai. We started flying missions pretty soon after we got to the base. They required that each pilot, or co-pilot, fly the first 5 missions with an experienced crew who'd been in combat before. And so for our first 5 missions, both I and the pilot were sent out to fly co-pilot with an experienced pilot and crew. So that was a big help. The only trouble was on my 4th mission, which was the first B-17 mission to Berlin. Sure enough, we got over Berlin, which by the way was strongly defended. They had anti-aircraft guns very thick on Berlin. It was the most heavily defended target in Europe. And besides that, they could bring in anti-aircraft guns on rail cars to the city. And by the time they knew we were leaving for Berlin, they had people who, they had intelligence spies and things who told them where we were going. So when we took off, they started bringing in the rail cars with the guns. Okay. We got over Berlin, dropped our bombs, and immediately got hit by flak on our left 2 engines. I was told to feather them by the pilot who was flying, and I was able to feather 1 engine, but the other prop was actually shot off the plane and fell down into Berlin. We had to drop down, of course, out of the formation because with 2 engines you couldn't keep the speed that the formation was flying. So we dropped down, and we made a decision to fly as low as possible because if you got low enough, a fighter plane couldn't hit you well. They could come at you from above, but they had a short run that they could actually shoot at you. So, and of course the flak couldn't shoot you that low because you were too low for the guns to bear on the plane. So we went down to about 100 feet above the ground and traveled back to Thurlai at that altitude. So we had no more trouble after we got knocked out of formation. And then the big raid came, the big in the sense that it was most dangerous, I guess. We went to Ham, the Rhineland, to bomb the biggest marshalling yards in Europe. Well, you know what a marshalling yard is? It's where the rail, where
the logistics from getting into.
Right. And of course they were quite important, and that was one of the main things that the 8th Air Force was trying to do, was to knock out these things, because the people who were in charge knew what was going to happen. The D-Day was coming. We didn't know it, and the crews didn't know it, but we knew what we were sent to do. All right, we went over there, and we went on a late afternoon mission. Actually, we didn't get off the ground till 2 o'clock, and it stays light a long time over there. It was light until 11 o'clock that night.
Oh, really?
And so we made our mission and we're back home. But when we got over Ham, we had dropped our bombs, but again we got hit by flak. And this time my regular crew was with me. I happened to be flying. We were knocked out of formation again. At this time, one of the engines would feather and one would not. And so when a prop won't feather, I don't know if you know, it windmills.
Yeah.
All right. When it was windmilling, it heated up the engine because oil pressure was not running in that engine, of course. So it began to shoot sparks out. Looked like it was going to burn. Well, then we had a decision to make as to whether to bring the plane home or bail out. We decided we'd take a chance on it and bring it home. I didn't want to stop, and neither did anybody else. So I flew the thing home in slow flight. You put the nose up and run the engines strongly as you can to hold the plane in the air. And we went down to about 10,000 feet and ran 2 engines out of the 4 at full military power. You're not supposed to run at full military power but 30 minutes. It took us about 2.5 hours to get home. So we overstressed those engines like mad. Well, we had luck. P-47s joined us, and 2 P-47s flew in formation, had to put down flaps, of course, flew in formation with us out to Belgium. So no fighters bothered us again. We got over Belgium, and they had flak guns on the coast. And so they fired at us, and we lost another engine. Now we're down to 1, see? And that one's been running full military power for all these times. So what we did was we threw out everything that was possible to throw out. We threw out flak suits and shells and guns and everything else we could drop out. And that was to lighten the plane as much as possible. But we were in a powered glide all the way across the North Sea. And we headed for an emergency strip that was built just inside the coast. It was, I think it was 3 miles inside the coast. And it was a full mile square of concrete. And you could come into it from whatever direction you wanted. You let them know by firing red flares that you were in trouble. And then you came in and landed. Well, I took it down onto the glide path and got as low as possible, ready to flare out and put it down. The last engine quit. There we are, we're landing dead stick. One of the best landings I ever made in my whole life. It went in like it was greased. On D-Day, I made 2 missions. One in the morning, they woke us up at 2 o'clock. We got the plane off the air at 4:30 and went over and bombed a rail yard just on the inside of Normandy, just over the cliffs from where the fighting was taking place. And this was an interesting thing in several ways. There were so many airplanes in the air that the 8th Air Force Command had established a traffic pattern. You went in a certain route, you turned around and came out another route, which was different than the way you went in. And the fighter planes were briefed to shoot down any B-17 or other bomber that turned back against the traffic flow, because that could have been a German captured plane that was coming the way it shouldn't. So we went in on the traffic pattern, did our bombing, and came back out. And we landed, and the plane was re-gassed and checked, and the bombs were replaced, and then we went again and made another mission. This time we bombed some of the gun emplacements and at Normandy. I want to make sure that you understand I'm not a war hero.